Good evening, you all. Good evening. I am Demetrius Reliford, and I am here with WOCS 93.7 FM, the People Station, New Perspectives. Got a very special guest in the building with us today, Mr. Phil Noble. Mr. Phil Noble, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So glad to get in touch with you. Phil, I recently noticed and heard that you are running for governor. Is that right?
Yeah, I am running. Been running for several months now. As I'm running for governor of the great state of South Carolina.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What are the platforms that you're bringing to this running this year?
Well, one of the things that has struck me over the last 30 years that I've been doing things around this state and education and healthcare and race relations, and it's just what an amazing state we have here. We're people who do enormous things, and we've had great potential in this state. But, recently we've just been held back by this broken and corrupt and dysfunctional system in Columbia, and we've got a political system that just essentially plantation politics these days, and it's given us this absolute outrageous utility scandal. It's given us the worst school system in the country. It's given us bad roads. It's given us poor health care. And we don't have to have all these things. I mean, it doesn't have to be this way. And we don't have to accept it. And I'm running for governor because I think that we can do radically better in all sorts of ways, and especially in reinventing education, which is really the most important thing we got to do in this state. But, it's dealing with that corrupted, broken system that's effectively keeping us from being the kind of state we need to be.
That's right. And you are currently the front runner in the running for the SC governor race Democratic primary, correct?
Well, there was a poll that came out in January that showed me 5 points up. So, you know how the polls are. You're ahead one day and some day you're behind, but, I'm ahead, so I'll take that. I'm happy.
That's right. You're currently doing 3 different projects, the Pell Metal Project, 1 laptop per child, as well as world-class scholars. How can those 3 projects implement in bringing more, bringing more success to the state of South Carolina?
Sure. All those are projects that I have been involved in and helped start, and some of them other people are now running, but they're all about the same thing. It's all about bringing innovative ideas about how to improve local communities and then working with people on the local level to do things that make a big difference. I mean, I'll give you just the Palmetto Project was really the first nonprofit group that I started, and that it's a very entrepreneurial nonprofit that's done a lot of things around creating race relations projects to try to deal with some of the racial issues around the state. Healthcare project started something called that became Well Vista that provided literally hundreds of thousands of people with free prescription drugs and other free health care. When you go vote, you get a little sticker that says, I have voted. And under it, if you look real close, there's a logo of the Palmetto Project, and that was one of our projects to try to get more people registered and voting. And so that was the Palmetto Project. And then other projects I've done, we started something called 1 Laptop Per Child, where we raised money and got literally thousands of computers in some of the worst corridor of shame schools. And it was not just a computer, it was a small educational laptop, so the kids could take them home with them. It'd be their computers while they were there in school. We started another project which was really just getting going called World-Class Scholars, which connect kids in South Carolina schools with schools around the world, where they connect online once a week for about an hour, and they learn together about the world. And there are 25 countries involved in the project. So all of these things are really about the same thing. It's about getting people involved on the local level in creative ways that make a difference in South Carolina, and we ought to be doing all these things times 10, but we can't as long as we've got this corrupt and broken and dysfunctional government in Columbia.
That's right. You're based in Charleston, South Carolina, correct?
I'm sorry?
You're based in Charleston, South Carolina, correct?
Yeah, I live in Charleston. I've lived here for about 35 years, but my family is from the upstate. Our family roots go back in a place called McCormick County, a little bitty county up on the Savannah River. And I was born in Greenville. So my family history is sort of one side of the state to the other.
That's right. And just in case you're tuning in, this is WOCS 93.7 FM, the People Station, New Perspectives. I'm Demetrius Reliford, here with Phil Noble, running for governor. He's based in Charleston, South Carolina. Phil, talk about a little bit how you were able to get the endorsements from people like Senator Doug Jones and such.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that. I've known Doug Jones for a long time. My family, when I was young, we moved to a place called Anniston, Alabama. And most people don't know of Anniston, but they know something about it. You know, there was that famous picture of the Freedom Riders bus getting burned with the big black smoke billowing out of there. Well, that was in my hometown. That was in Anniston, Alabama. And to make a very long story short, Anniston, as a result of that, formed the first biracial commission in the South trying to deal with racial problems. And my dad became the chairman of it. And it was a big Klan town. And so you had the Klan and George Wallace trying to make sure what they did fail, and Bobby Kennedy and President Kennedy trying to support them. And one thing led to another, and there was lots of violence and racial incidents. And in 1965, the Klan had a big rally, and they went out and they killed a black guy. And the city fathers got together, and they put up a reward. And the guy was arrested and tried by an all-white jury. And after 20 ballots, he was convicted of murder. And it was the first white guy convicted of killing a black in the South since Reconstruction. And years later, when the FBI records were released, we found out that my dad was number one on the Ku Klux Klan's hit list. And every day before I'd go to school, he'd open the hood of the car and look for a bomb, and he slept with a shotgun under the bed at night. And that was one of the early impetuses for my engagement in politics. And Doug Jones, for people who don't remember, he was the U.S. attorney who opened the Birmingham bombing case where the 4 little girls were killed and sent some Klansmen to jail in the 1990s. Well, Doug knew of my father and his work in civil rights, and he and I became friends over the years. And as a matter of fact, he was in Charleston back last spring, and I was trying to talk him into running for senator, and he was trying to talk me into running for governor. So it's really a lot of the same dynamics that are going on in Alabama that are happening here. And as he said in his endorsement letter to me, that, you know, Alabama, the South is changing, and Democrats can win in the South. And his race was really the first example of that, and he thinks I can be the second, which is why he endorsed me and is supporting me in the race.
That's awesome. Once again, if you're tuning in just now, it's WOCS 93.7 FM, New Perspectives. I'm Demetrius Reliford, here talking with the one and only Phil Noble, running for governor based out of Charleston, South Carolina. Phil, let's talk about a little bit about the statement that you issued about the NRA record. How does that affect the South? And also, how does it affect other countries?
Sure. Well, all you have to do is pick up the newspaper and look around and see what gun violence is doing in our state and in our country. And there's no excuse for it. There's no reason why we ought to be killing our children and women and minorities at the rate we are. And, there's one organization that is the biggest, the devil, if you will, in this, and that's the NRA. And the NRA has effectively stopped common sense gun legislation, not only in the country but in South Carolina. And I can't imagine any organization that I am more opposed to their policies and ideas than the NRA. And one of my opponents in the race, James Smith, has been in the legislature for years. He has repeatedly gotten an A rating from the NRA. He was endorsed by the NRA 3 different times. And when I asked him about it, he said it didn't happen. He says it's not true. But it is true. And I issued the statement and showed the listing on the NRA site where he got the A ratings, where he was endorsed by the NRA. And, it's a perfect example of the problem. Here we got a politician who's supporting the NRA, supporting their positions, and people are dying. And then he stands up and says it's not true. And I just think that's the worst example of the kind of hypocrisy we have in our politics in South Carolina. And I just think it's wrong. And, the NRA is the biggest single impediment to us having safe streets and safe schools and having a safe society. And I don't think it's a political issue. I think it's a moral issue. And I'm stand up for it, and I make no bones, and I'm not going to back down. And, and I'm going to hold James and every other politician in this state who supports NRA, because I think it's just plain morally wrong.
How do you plan to implement to change the legislations dealing with the NRA if you were chosen to be governor? Yeah. Well,
there are very few issues that I think are just black and white. And this is it. I would stake out some positions that I think where we can have movement on. We can't win everything at once, but the reality is the people in South Carolina want common sense gun laws. Something like 75% of the NRA members support waiting periods, and I want to extend the waiting period, double the waiting periods to get a permit. I want to change the law that says you can't buy a firearm unless you're 21 years old. We ought to ban assault weapons, all assault weapons for civilian use. And what we've got to do is we've got to mobilize people, including gun owners and NRA members. Hell, I got guns. I own guns. But it's not about owning guns. It's about safety for our families and our children. And, we can do hard things in this state. We took the Confederate flag down, and it was hard for a lot of Republicans to vote for that. But the communities around them organized and said to them, it's time to take that flag down. And I believe the same thing is happening now. It's time we had common sense gun laws. And I think that the young people are leading the way on this. And I think that's incredibly important. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a scoop. I'll give you an exclusive. We've got a bunch of young people who are supporters of mine at the University of South Carolina and they are organizing this Sunday a massive rally in support of common sense gun laws and in opposition to the NRA. And it's going to be a big rally at the USC campus right there in front of Russell House on Green Street at noon on Sunday. And I would encourage anybody, USC, SC State, Claflin, USC, Clemson, high school students, anybody, parents, anybody who's concerned about this, to come to that rally at noon on Sunday at USC. So there you have it. It hasn't even been publicly announced yet, but you got an exclusive.
Yes, right. Exclusively here on WOCS 93.7 FM, the People Station. Before we get out of here, Phil, can you give them a little bit of contact information on how to reach you and also how to get out there and vote when it's time to vote?
Absolutely. We're easy to find. Just go to philnoble.com on the web. Leave us your email address so we can be in contact with you and let you know what we're doing so we can keep you updated. If you got a few bucks, I appreciate anything you can do. We are not the party of the big money insiders in Columbia. And so we're having to rely on lots of grassroots support from people who can contribute $5, $10, $25. Anything helps. It's ultimately, if we're going to change South Carolina, it's got to be the people get involved, because this plantation politics system in Columbia ain't going to change, but we can change it. It ain't going to change by itself, and it's not going to change if we elect the same old politicians, Democrat and Republican, who are career politicians, who spend their time trying to figure out how to benefit from being a member of the legislature as opposed to doing our business. And that's what it's all about from my perspective, and that's why I'm running.
And we'd like to thank you again for coming through. And I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with us on 93.7. And I hope everything is going to go well, and much success to you, Mr. Noble.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And once again, we'd like to thank our sponsor.